I am going to turn it over to Carol. She did our parenting your adult children part one last time, and that was a huge success. So hopefully you guys enjoy this one as well. So I'm going to let her go ahead and get started.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, we did this last month, and part one of parenting your adult children. So, as I finished the last one last month, right as we were getting done, we're like, whoa, there's so much. And I didn't realize that till I was, done at the hour mark, that we needed more. And so we'll see. I'm going to review a little bit of that, but we're going to see what we can kind of discuss today. So hopefully I'm looking for some input. We're going to role play a little bit. We're going to discuss together a little bit about what we're dealing with here. As Heather said, I'm in the Orem office, and you know me by now, hopefully, and most of these that we do are recorded and put on YouTube, so you can watch the other ones. So I refer to a lot of the other workshops that are already done. So go ahead and check out YouTube channel for Blomquist Hill if you need to, and then keep registering for future workshops. And if your company has a need, or if you have a need, or if you just send me an email and say, okay, this is something that's coming up, and this one's coming up because I see it in therapy a lot, and my own practice, and in society, and yes, it added some stress in this last couple of years for sure, in parenting our adult children. So let's get to it. So this is kind of the list that we had from the last workshop, right? And so we kind of I kind of highlighted these, and I thought we need to go more into dealing with this disappointment, or celebrating, or going through life's challenges. So the thing is staying in your roles is super important. Setting boundaries with that, super important. What's our own healing that needs to go on about being a parent, or about our own, I guess, shame, depletion, how we've parented our disappointments, but our regrets. There's some things that are happening, and we'll just kind of generalize it to America, that has never happened before. And that is how we are parenting our adult children. This has never happened. And how fast it's moving, and the PowerPoint explains some of that. Like I said last month, I tried to find resources and books. I have a few more that I found, but every single one of them, the couple more that I found, there's one that's not, but a couple more that I read and went through and had more time. I'm trying to read. I mean, I read dozens of articles. Those are somewhat new, but all the books and the resources are 10 years old, and that is not doing it for me. So it's not the same. And so even in the last 10 years, it's changed so much. In the last 20 years, parenting has changed. So I don't know about you guys, but you can go ahead and chat. Anything you want to, comment. And so make sure that you respond, check in, ask questions, so we can have a little bit of dialogue of what you're struggling with. You can kind of ask yourself the question, how am I dealing with disappointment, or how am I celebrating, and how am I, obviously you're in here because you have adult children, but maybe you have some teenagers and you're like, wow, we're moving through this, and what do I do when they are adults, and how do we deal with that? So, okay, again, this was in my last one, last month's, but so it's now like about 60 something percent. Okay, so it's over 60% that 18 to 29-year-olds are living with a parent. This was pre-COVID. This is, now we're talking post-COVID. So it has never happened at that high, literally, as we, as our senses go back this far. So as far as we can tell, it has really not happened. So, so this is just like, you can see this trend, right? So it went really low in the 60s, right? That was baby boomer time. And so, yeah. So this is just new. I think it's all new to us, right? Okay. So the other part that's really new, that's really coming up fast, is us supporting our children in some financial way. So in lots of research, or statistics I read, there was up to over 40% of people are helping their adult children with $1,000 plus a month. So I don't know about you guys, but that's a lot. So you go ahead and chat about that. Anybody that wants to talk about that in the chat, like, what are you doing? You have an extra $1,000 around, just fun to help support your child. And if 60+% are living with us, then we're supporting them and housing them and then paying for their bills. So this is where. So we're just going to talk. I'm just going to really quickly go over some basic parenting stuff, because this is the part where we have responsibility and how we parent, whether they're adult children or not. But it's a little bit different, when we get to that hovering part, right? When they're past 17, or we're having very, no interaction whatsoever, or we are this, drill sergeant, which I don't think we're doing this as much, and so it is just, these three are not helping our adult children. But this last one, this, permissive and helicopter parent, is really what is happening a lot more than before. So here we're just, we're being a little bit more passive, of course, than the drill sergeant that we were, in the 60s, 70s. Okay, so we're going to go over this a little bit, and I'll get to the chat in a second. So 12 types of parenting according to, so Webb, one of my books on this that I referenced to adults that are now parents and mature, parents of adult children, is learning what it is that their parents did, number one. So if this is your type of parenting, but look at the list is for what type of parent you had. So if you had this kind of parenting, a narcissistic or permissive or addicted or depressed or alcoholic, workaholic, or a parent child, and we're going to define some of these things, a perfectionist parent, and you grew up with these things, it's really difficult to not move that through to your own children. So it's a little bit of going backwards. Okay. So part two is like, let's go backwards a little bit more and see and dig deep about our wounds, because then we can help and coach and challenge our adult children. It's really important to understand what you had and what's different now, because this will not work on your kids. These 12, they just don't work. So they might have worked on us a little bit, right? So the workaholic parent might have worked, and it would have been okay, or the perfectionist parent, but these are what's causing neglect, emotional neglect, in a lot of the issues that our adult children are going through. So just look at the list, kind of mark off right now, like, okay, I have, my parent was, 6 out of the 12, or I had some of these in one parent, some of the other, or I had split parents. And so I had step parents. Yeah. So just how were you raised? And And if you go into the parental role, or were you in the child role when you were raised? And then how are you raising your children? Are you in the parental role, or are you in the child role? It's not so good to be in the child role when you're the parent. We want this. We want it just right. We want coach and challenge. We want thinking words. We want the emotional intelligence. We want the discipline, and we want the boundaries, where it's just right and consistent. And that's really hard to do if you have been emotional neglect yourself as a child growing up. So I'm not going to go over this too much, because you can watch part 1. If you miss part 1, I'm just reviewing a little bit, but if you miss part 1, just go back, and that is on YouTube, so you can watch it. But here's some toxic children who consistently engage in entitlement and dramatic, manipulative behavior. So if you're doing that, recognize it. If your child is doing that, this is just an example. This explains, I love this model because I see it every single day in practice. So if you're doing this, get out of the triangle. If your adult child is doing this to you, I explain this word for word in a session, because adults, the mature parent of adult children come to me with very toxic adult children behavior. And I teach them how to get out of the triangle, right? So it has to be that way. So if you have this going on, okay, if you have over here, if you're bullying, being bullied, you're the persecutor, just read this list. Puts the victim down, drives behavior, bossy, domineering. So the rescuer is what I was talking about earlier. And that type of parenting is like, I feel guilty if I don't rescue. I feel connected with the victim, and I'm going to keep the victim down here. Oh, I feel so bad that you can't get a job. I'm so, just stay here as long as you can. And then it's like, it feels good to rescue the victim. So what we want is coach and challenge. So let's review here a little bit so far. So our adult children living with parents due to inflation. Yes, like crazy, right? So that's what we kind of talked about last month, a little bit of like, holy moly, these kids have zero hope. And so this inflation has forced students to move back home, quit school. I mean, that happened a lot. So there was a huge high percentage of kids moving back home during COVID. But what happened is they stayed. They've stayed. Yeah, it's like 68% now. So it was like 47% moved home, and now it's like 68% are still at home. Yeah, out of the it's insane. So it's a lot more than anything. But yeah, so you support the kids, or you house the kids, or you do both. It's almost, that's how it's having to pan out. So let's see, healthcare system has been a big difference. Yeah, at least, it's like now it's like, okay, they can stay on our health insurance till they're 26, so they don't have to worry about that. But someone feels guilty because I don't have the financial means to help and can't allow them to live with me. Some people just don't have a room. Yeah, it's like, because to have a house, and if you have to downsize, then how do you, after your kids move out and, they're 20 something, how do you keep yourself from getting stuck and sucked into the drama triangle? Okay, your spouse or adult. That's a perfect question. Just so you know, that's my favorite question right there. How do you not get sucked into the drama triangle? Let's see, and I cross out some things, I add parent, child, adult to this, right? So this triangle is like, you either are in the parent, adult, child role, which I'm going to talk about next. But so number one, I see every like 90% plus of my couples are in an adult child relationship stuck in this triangle. And I pull it out and I say, okay, are you a persecutor or rescuer? Or are you coach and challenge? Because if you're in a parent-child, that's just with your spouse, it's just gross. It's really not attractive. So we have to go into it. The number one way to get out of this with a spouse or adult child is to report. And number one is state boundaries. So that's why this is my favorite, state boundaries. Actively listen and then make exceptions, but clear expectations. There's sometimes there's some expectations that can be, like you can compromise on, but the expectations are clear and you have to know what that is. And then you provide choices. You know what? You can either pay me rent on the first, all of it, or you know what? I'm good with the first and the 15th or when you get paid, but this is the contract, with helping out a little bit or utilities, or so it has some merit to the agreement. So here's the two lists of how you coach and challenge, right? It's the same thing. This one's always state the boundary first. But if you want to coach, it's like, you know what, I care about you and I know you're capable. So here's the boundary. Okay, right? So it's either, but it's really, you got to have the clear boundary, but really give the message first that I care about you and you're capable. And I know that you've done this before. I'm super proud of you. That year that you moved out, you did really well. Even though I had to help you a little bit, or your car got towed and I had to go get your car out of the, out of the wrecking yard because you didn't even have enough money to get your car towed, get your car out of the wrecking yard. Okay. But I'm super proud of you and I know you're capable. So we're going to have to figure out how you're going to pay back on that because you didn't have the money, because this is an extra thing. So before COVID, just to give you a little bit of when we do financial support for our clients and for our companies, a little bit, we talk about financial help, and what, how to budget and things like that. Statistically, before COVID, 68% of Americans could not handle $1,000 emergency. So if my kiddo can't get her car out of the wrecking yard because it got towed at say it was $130 or something, that's pretty bad, right? But most people are in that boat. They either pay rent, food, or not pay their bills on something else. So hopefully that clears it up. But here's the parent-child adult, right? So in order to stay in the parental role, spouse role, to answer your question again, is just two adults. So parent-child, you want to stay out of the trauma triangle, right? So social relations reflects on exchange between parental, adult, childlike aspects of personality development early in life. And that's what we want is a thriver. So that's a little bit of that. We'll move through that a little faster. Know your role. This is here. Talked about a little bit again. So parents, this goes all the way back to your childhood. And what you think about it, when did we go into a child ego state? I'm trained in ego state strategies by Shapiro. And so I do a lot of parts work. And so it's like, here's your child part, here's your adult part. Oh, wait, which one do we want to be in? If you go into child role, you go into victimization, right? So we want to just stay out of that and just jump back into the parental role. Okay, so this was in there. We didn't talk about it much, but we're going to role play this a little bit. Okay, so that's why I left this one in here. I know this is repetitive, but we're just reviewing and it makes sense. And if you haven't, so it all kind of flows. So dependency, independent, interdependent, codependent, counterdependent. One of my favorite things to talk about is codependency and counterdependent because it's anxious attachment is codependency and avoidant attachment is counterdependency. And I am an attachment theorist. So really understanding your attachment is super, super important, and how you want to attach to your children. That's this book right here. So this is, this is not adults, but man, this happens, kids, but it still can happen in your, parenting your adult kids, because why parents need to matter more than their peers. Hello, this is not happening anymore. Parents don't matter as much as peers right now. And so we've become peer oriented. That is a problem. And this book explains that. One of my favorite two authors, Gordon Newfield and Gabor Mate. So yeah, I think that's referenced in the back of this too. Added it in. So let's talk about codependency or counterdependency. So I don't need anybody. I don't trust anyone. I don't want to trust. And then codependency is like, oh, I feel the desire and the need, and I'm unimportant if I feel responsible for your feelings and actions and others. I have a strong desire for approval from my parents or from my partner or from, and so that's the codependency. And you will do very passive behavior to stay in that desire approval. So the thing is about attachment is we want approval from our biological parents, honestly, or our caregiver for our whole entire life. And so we do seek that approval, but it has to be in a healthy way. And we want to produce interdependency in all relationships. So together, both people give and receive support and encouragement. That's what we want for a marriage. That's what we want for a partnership. That's what we want for parenting. We want to be interdependent because we're wired for connection. That's just how it is. It's not going to change. Our brain is, we're human. We're not robots and we're not aliens. We are wired for connection, support, and encouragement from other humans. So we need that. So let's role play that a little bit. When we get through boundaries. So just again, I'm just going to skip over this, but it's in the PowerPoint in case you didn't get that before. And this is the first time in this. When I do a part 2, I kind of put those in there. So you have them. But these are the boundaries. So to answer your question, how to get out of the triangle, you have to understand what your boundaries are and picking one and then working on it. Okay. So this is why we have them. Know your value systems, know your emotions, know your fears, know what self-care looks like and what your needs are. And then you repeat and repeat and repeat. Okay. So dealing with disappointment. This is where I'm having lots of clients come in with lots of disappointment. So we're going to talk about, let's talk about some disappointment of your children not choosing your values. Your children not choosing your values, what you would want them to do. So let's discuss that a little bit. What do you do? What do you do when you are disappointed in your children's, do you do this? This is my Traumatize Your Children book. Do you traumatize them more? What comes up when I say, oh yeah, right? No, when your kids don't follow your values, not your rules, but just your values, your choice, what you'd want them to do. Are you okay with it? Anybody want to chime in? How do you deal with your child's, choices, making their own choices? Everybody sounds like they're okay with it? Because I hear lots of disappointment in that. Like, yeah, this is not what I expected my kids to turn out to do or be, or things like that. So it disrupts a positive feeling of hope. And then you feel guilty. So we can't just guilt trip our kids into changing their value systems, right? So Yes. So when it's hard, to let them make their own choices. Let's see, it's like, I still love you, but I don't agree with your choices. Okay, we have that. It's hard because letting them choose is hard to watch them sometimes, of course, because there's natural consequences we're going to talk about, a little bit of more, hard consequences that you have to watch them go through. So someone said it's very hard. It's just really, really hard to see them make choices that are different than what you thought or think that they should be doing. So I feel like I need to voice my opinion, but then I have to step back and let them exercise their free agency. Wow, you got it. You got it. You should just teach the rest of this class because that's exactly what we have to do. But it's super hard. Exclamation point. So, as most of you know, I have 7 children from 30 down to 20 blended. So lots of adult children that you just watch them make their own decisions. As long as they are not being destructive. Okay, so there's some bars, right? That we're going to role play like, destructive behavior against the law behavior, right? What do you do with that? Or I had to remind my dad allowed me to make my choices and therefore I need to do the same with my kids. Well, that's good that you had a father that like allowed you to have free agency and make some choices, even though it's hard to see them say, oh, but don't we learn from those, right? Disappointing to see the influence of ex-husband, yes, and the youngest son. It's hard when you don't have control is what that means, right? Super hard when other people are making choices for them or helping them be influenced. And so that's where we have to take back our kids and hold on to them because peers influence, teacher, adults, okay, grandparents. It's not that I am okay. Sometimes you have to let them make their own choices. Their experience is far more powerful. Yeah. Yeah, those are all fantastic comments. It sounds like we're on the right track. But it's still really difficult. And we end up doing some guilt, inside of ourselves. And so then sometimes we do get into that guilt or grief. So it's like, that's the biggest one I see is this grief, because what's happened that's never happened before that I talked to a lot of people about is children alienating their parents. They're divorcing their parents because 20-something-year-olds, like I said last month that I always talk about, I call them 20-something-year-olds. So 20 to 30s, right? The 20-something-year-olds are going to therapy. They're doing things a little different sometimes. They're finding their voice. They're putting up all these really good boundaries. And then we're saying, okay, I hear you. I see what you want to do. I see, hopefully, right? We can see their perspective. And that disrupts our hope for what, we think that they're making the wrong choice or the right choice or whatever it is. And so that causes some grief sometimes, and then that turns into some guilt. So it disrupts that feeling. But we can respect what our child is, the choices they're making. But at the same time, it's like when a child alienates you because they've labeled you and projected, blamed, displaced, all those defense mechanisms and blamed you for their pain, that is not okay. That is where we have some serious grief. So we will talk about that. That's toxicity a little bit, so yeah. So yes. How do you all of a sudden, someone brought up that, it's like you're responsible for their choices and their upbringing. And then all of a sudden you're like, yeah, you're 18. Yeah, it's not 18 anymore, but yeah, that's technically law wise 18. Go go do what you want to do, because the law takes over after that. If you get your car impounded because you got a DUI, 21, 18, 35, what do we do? The law takes over at that point at 18. So you can't, so a little bit of that is in there, but and then all of a sudden you have to just let that go, right? Okay, let's role play. Some natural consequences versus tough love. Does anybody want to know the difference? Because remember, I found a book last time about this and I didn't like it. Like, honestly, I've never sent back a book ever because I didn't like it. So tough love is not how this works, honestly. If you want to go back to the parenting styles, you'll see how tough love is, okay? And what that looks like. It's the drill sergeant. It's like, yep, we're going to let you have tough love. That's not how this works anymore. It really doesn't. So do you let your child, okay, let's do this role play. Let's just, off the top of my head, the child gets a DUI, because I worked in substance abuse for years for the court systems. So say they're 19 and a half and they live with you, okay? And they just got a DUI and they got their car impounded because they're underage and they had an open container, okay? So underage, under 21, you're just an automatic DUI, and an open container, you're automatic DUI. And that car got impounded. What do you do? You guys are all smarter than I am. Anybody have an example of what you would do, or what have you had to do? Maybe. But yeah, real tough, right? So do you bail them out of jail? Do you let them sit? So they're going to sit in jail for 24 hours, most likely. They're going to, and then they're going to have to get a ride home. Or you can bail them out early. Natural consequences or tough love? Is that so thumbs up on that's a natural consequence and a tough love if you leave them in jail overnight for 24 hours. Is that tough love and natural consequences? It is a natural consequence. So a tough love would be you not picking them up from jail and then have them walk home. See what I'm saying? Now, no judgment. You do what you need to do in all situations of this when we role play. But that's tough love. That's not necessary for them to learn to, a natural consequence. Now, their natural consequence is going to come because I work with those folks. It's going to come. They're going to have lots. They're going to have court fines. They're going to have to, yeah. So drug or DUI, by the way, yeah. Either example, because they're going to go through the court system and they're going to have natural consequences to going through the court system. So tough love would be you kicking them out of the home because they got a DUI. Now, showing up with drugs in your house, like my policy would be, personal therapist, yeah, so we don't do anything illegal. So under the age of 21, remember, this is a 19.5 role play that I just made up. So it is illegal to have drugs, illegal to have alcohol in the presence of this minor, under 21. So, but they're still living with you and they're 18. So they can do what they want, right? But the law says you can't. So it's an in-between, right? So I would leave them in jail. I would pick them up when they did their time, then work out a way for them to pay for their vehicle to come out of impound perfect. You have to do natural consequences, but it doesn't mean that we need a kiddo to hit rock bottom and not have a lawyer and have a DUI on their record for 10 years instead of a DWI. If it's their first offense, we want a DWI instead, blah, blah, blah. You're going to coach and challenge them is the best way to do. It never says tough love. I'm going to cut you off. I'm going to kick you out. I'm going, right? But then where's the limits? We can go keep going on this of like, well, they bring an alcohol into the house, then they get another charge, and then they, they need more drug evaluation, more drug stuff, right? More treatment. And then you're going to help them find treatment and go through the court system, because the court system is going to make them do all those things. So what do? If they don't pay off their fine, if they, yeah, they go to jail. They could, right? So that's a little scenario. Okay. You want to go to the next one? It's 240. So last time someone brought up like, how do you deal with your adult child with your in-laws? Like, who they marry, you don't love who they marry, or you don't get along, or they have put some toxicity into the triangle, and now you've got, daughter-in-law, son, and you in the triangle. So let's do a little scenario on that. How have you guys dealt with that? Or like mother-in-law issues, and fighting over holidays. So there's one part of one book that I had written down that, let your kids deal with holidays the way they deal with holidays, because we have this expectation that we want our kids to continue the traditions of holidays, and we get really upset and toxic when they don't follow those things anymore. And I hear it constantly from my 20-something-year-olds and my 30-year-old that are, kind of newly married, and they're like, yeah, my parents want us to do this, this, and this, and this, and they don't get it. And then they, punish me for putting up my own boundaries around holidays and my own traditions. So you have any issues with that? You have any issues with in-laws, or, who your kiddos are with? We probably don't approve of some of their partners, right? Or is that one a good one to, any comments on that? And so while we're thinking about that, what happens when the boundaries are violated? And you're worried about harming the people that are harming you. Yeah, we split the holidays. Yeah, it's just how it is. But why is it that parents get upset when, or when kids get upset when the boundaries are violated? Both ways. Boundaries are violated from the kid to the parent, or vice versa. And why are we worried about harming the person that's harming us? Think about that one. Is that that's way over my head that I see a lot. Like I look at clients sometimes and I say, why are you so protective of someone that is harming you? Well, that's a little toxicity. That's a syndrome. That's where we're hovering over, coddling, right? The person that's harming, especially with the toxic child that's coming back at us and alienating us. And they're really, we're not doing the things that they claim that is causing them harm. So, yeah, state the boundary is not the problem. So you know how to do that, right? So there's a boundary. So do we have let's see, do I need an example of that? Like, state the boundary, not the problem. So the number one thing in a lot of research, a lot of books is like, okay, here's the boundary. I need you to text me if you're going to be late. Here's the 18, 19, 20 something are super difficult, because it's like, oh, you're 18, but is there a curfew still, while they're living at home? So the boundary is, I need you to let me know where you are, like that you're okay, or that you're coming home later, so I don't have to worry about you. And so then the problem is not that they are staying out late. You see what I'm saying? Don't state the problem. just state the boundary. So, yeah. And then if they violate that boundary, that is your family rules that you need to discuss and say, yeah, what does it look like for us when you violate these boundaries? And just keep moving through those. Okay. So I talked about this alienation stuff, right? So it wasn't even more than like a week after I did the adults, the first one, when I was in a training for the whole day. And guess what happened? It was on toxic family relationships. And like 50% of the workshop was on parenting your adult child. And I haven't ever done, seen any trainings on this because I'm serious. This is really coming up. And so one of the co-hosts of the workshop, of the training, was Coleman. So I found a book. I found an author. It's not super new, but it's way newer than anything else that I found. So he has these two things. So I'm not gonna play him for you because we don't have time, because that's why I put all this in here. So you can get the workshop video and the PowerPoint and go click on YouTube yourself. So 5 mistakes made. I really liked this one. Okay. These are like 5 minutes, I think. Healing the pain. Watch both of these. Okay. I can show them to you, but that's, to me, it's a waste of time in here. So just why adult children cut ties and how to heal the conflict. Hello, it's perfect. So these social changes, we have to go through radical acceptance, living in mindfulness, which is just the present, and relationships are a choice. So you know what? Our children have the choice to cut us out. It's never happened in history at this level. Think about it. We have not done this before. We don't need to cut our parents out. We just have this higher level of hierarchy, right? We've never had that thing happen, like where we have a voice to say, oh, wait, you know what, mom and dad, you're being a little bit overbearing or toxic or, da 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 da. And so we're just going to have to cut you out for a minute. And I've had adult mature parents come into my office and saying, my kids have told me I have to go to therapy before I can do the grandkids overnight, or I've got some things going on that I keep on, doing this really toxic behavior. And so we work through that. It's like, why is your kids, disowning you in the first place? Is it their toxicity or is it yours, right? Some of both. So he talks about that, why your adult children cut ties and how to heal the conflict. And he like pulls in the parent, he pulls in the kid. He wants to talk to both. I'm like that. I'm a certified family educator, CFLE. And so I'm always doing family therapy. I want everybody in as much as possible, because then you get all sides, you can heal some things, and then you can have a conversation and make it safe. So yeah. Okay. So there's that. You watch those on your own and see what you think about those. So the end goal is to heal your own wounds. You have to understand your own identity, your own ego state, your own adult state, your own child state to do that. That's challenging, because if you don't go through the coach and challenging to your child, right? So the emptiness is yours to fill up. That's running on an empty book, right? So what's the difference between your culture and your children's? We talked about that a little bit last time, but really this is, we've already gone over this. So it's just different. It's just different. The culture is different. So lots of statistical differences that have never happened. So it's time to pull out of the rescuing. And that's what we're doing, though. That's what's different. The most that over time is how we parented is rescuing. So, we could have role played, another role play that I had, was like, how do you give up your you know, how do you cut off the money, right? How do you make a different plan? How do you coach and challenge, right? So how can you give up something you don't have? So understanding your wounds, write a letter to self, change the code. Okay. So change the code, change the story, change whatever you want to call it, the narrative. So all or nothing thinking doesn't work. If you can't see someone else's perspective, understanding your own wounds, displacement, I kind of put that out there as what's happening in a defense mechanism to your child. If they are displacing their pain and blaming you and they're 20, 30, 40 something, they haven't gone through their own wounds, and you need to give that back to them. And when a child gets into radical acceptance of, wow, my parents did the best they knew how, and they are still, I'm going to give them that benefit of the doubt, then they will be a different human as an adult to you. But displacing and transferring destruction and delusion and denial and dismissing that they had any part in stuff is not okay. That's where we cut off. I've had some in my office that have had to cut off their adult children because they continue to do this last one, not second to last one. They displace and transfer all this destructive feelings onto their parents, and they don't let it go in that way. So it's like, that's not okay to continually being, a punching bag. That is not okay. So that's when I'm dealing, when I'm dealing with the adult, the parent of the adult, it's like, no, I look at them, I'm like, that is not okay. We don't get to blame our parents for everything that ever went wrong in their life and continues to go wrong. So if that's part of what's going on with you, then yeah. But this is what we do. We take responsibility, we regulate, we apologize, we reconnect, and we say, hey, if you can repair this with me, great. I will repair, and I will radically accept that this is how this is. And if we can't do that, but this is what adults do. Adults. So if you have an adult child, they are supposed to be at this level, right? They can take responsibility, they can regulate. We don't always accept and expect this from an 18 under. We really don't. They are not equipped to reconnect and repair and then radically accept that, oh, my parents did the best they did, the best they knew how. And they can take responsibility for their part. But this is what adults do. So hopefully you get to that point, right? But you're still in the parental role, you're in the child role, but we're two adults. Okay. So this is another one. I was just talking about that a little bit. So a description of this is 10 years old. Getting to 30, but there's some good key points in here. Okay. So it's not bad. And I put there's like 35 pages of it right here if you click on this link. So it's the beginning of it, right? But really, it's like 6 ways to listen more, to, then talk, knowing when to open the bank of mom and dad while saving the retirement, to figuring out the protocol of social media. So this is really behind, right? The protocol of social media, 10 years, holy cow. No, but there's some points in here that you can say, okay, how do we close the bank? Closing the bank all the way, maybe that's tough love. Natural consequences comes when you close the bank a little bit. I always, I have a really supportive husband. It's always like, okay, when I'm like, what do I do? Do I do this again? Do I do that? Do I do this? Do I do that? And we talk a lot about, our children and how we support them. And it's like, how do we make those decisions? It's your own decision to make. No one has to shame you or blame you for helping your child. Don't let anyone tell you that you should cut them off or not, or, because if you believe that your child is really intently trying and they're working and they're trying to get ahead, this economy and everything that happened is very, very difficult. We do not need our children to hit rock bottom. You don't need to leave them in jail for them to learn that. But, you can let them stay in for 24 hours. But I mean, leave them in jail, meaning leave them there, right? So literally, but not literally. So just remember how hard it is differently culturally right now for 20-something-year-olds. We kind of just had to be, it's so different of how they're getting married, how they're not getting married, how they're going to school, how they're not going to school, what their career looks like, what it doesn't look like, and how to buy property, how to buy a house now. It's so different. So I think it's very, very difficult. And what's happening is they are very discouraged and hopeless. So we just want to help them along with that, right? So does that mean helping them out when you can? If you can, then you do. But anyways, so here's some books. A little more references. Brainstorm is one of my favorite. It's not just for the teenage brain. It is, and it's also 10 years old, but it's Brain, and it's Dan Siegel, one of my top 5 authors. So the birth order book's really interesting, like, oh, all your kids are different, right? Because you're birth order. Everything's referenced here. Mindset, of course, is Carol Dweck. That's like how to get into a growth mindset, parenting style. Super important. Running on empties here. Yeah. Anything else? And some, Gifts of Imperfection on parenting. There is Gifts of Imperfection on Audible by Brené Brown. That's a parenting part of that. That's super, super good. Okay, so anything else? Let's see. I know it goes by. So, I think time, when I do these, they go by so fast. And that's why I put so much information in. I go through really fast. And I'm not going to apologize for that because I do it every time. And it's okay, because I know that's how it is. And I'd rather have you engaged and it go by fast than go by slow. So I'll leave you with this. And as you think of some questions, results for neglecting your child. So this is my little traumatized book. I give this to parents, and as I meet with our children in my office, then I send this book out. And so it's like, how to screw up your kid. 7 proven methods to help screw up your kid. So here's some methods. Just kidding. So results of low self-esteem, feeling unworthy of love, attention-seeking troublemakers, seek out withholding emotion, anger issues, depressed. This is what happens to a neglected kid. So small or old, small or old, young or old, small or big, whatever size your kiddo is at. Just think that all I've learned from having adult children is that the thing is all I can do and all I hope and wish and pray for is to be a better grandparent to my grandkids, because that is the whole purpose I have figured out that I want to do. So that's where I'm at, right? Is to make sure I show up for my grandkids. And if I want to be the best adult and parent to my adult children, so I can show up for my grandkids, and I'm lucky enough to have a few of those, 3 or plus. So it's like, and I hope to have more to be engulfed in that kind of joy and in grandparenting. So yeah. Anything else? Okay, let's see.